Hello, and welcome to Catholicism in the Car. My name is Parker Zerbal. Alrighty, I want to continue our discussion on divorce and remarriage. This is an episode within our social issues series here on the Catholicism in the Car podcast. And I want to look at this question of divorce and remarriage from a few different angles. The first would be, as I discussed last time, the effect it has upon the children within that marriage. But that doesn't take into account what if the persons do not have children within that marriage. Then can they get divorced? Well, that's where I would tack on another principle here regarding this issue. And that would be the principle of integrity. And I think this is something that is quite basic to the question of marriage, but yet is not talked about very much. This question of integrity. Because what is a marriage? Well, by most historical societal standards, it would be the union of a man and a woman for life. The man and the woman make vows to each other to be with each other, to protect each other, to love each other, as long as either party shall live, right? And once you take any of those elements away, either the man and the woman part or the lifelong commitment part away, you no longer have marriage. It's not marriage anymore. It's just a friendship, or a sexual partnership that has no other significance but that, right? Yeah, so once you take away either the male or the female parties, and you make it either both male, both female, whatever combination the heck you want, or when you take away the finality of marriage, the commitment, the integrity of marriage, it's no longer marriage. If you say, well, maybe you keep the man and woman part, but you take away the for life part, it's not a marriage. It's just two people dating at that point, or in some sort of a sexual relationship of whatever stripe, right? So either you reduce marriage down to friendship, or you keep it elevated at where it is regarding those two principles. And these two principles regarding marriage, really set the stage for the question of divorce. If marriage is a union between a man and a woman for life, then divorce is anything that breaks that, right? Anything that breaks that marriage. And then you have the question of remarriage, right? You have the question of remarriage, which, if you're taking this view of marriage, which would be male and female for life, then, unless one party has died, then there's no remarriage possible without breaking the vow that you made. Now, I get it. There's some people that are out there and they make marriage vows that are, I'm going to be with you for as long as I want to be, all these sorts of things. Again, that's not a marriage. If you want to use the word marriage, you have to mean something specific by it. And just saying that I'm going to be with you for a certain contracted amount of time, I mean, how is that any different than a dating relationship? I guess, other than the contract time part. So, I mean, heck, if you say that's the point of your relationship, that's your definition of marriage, is that it's for a contracted amount of time, whether that be for the rest of life or for 5 minutes. I mean, for the sake of argumentation, fine. That doesn't really fix the problem of divorce, because once that contract is up, then you're no longer married, and then there can't be a divorce, and there can't be remarriage. You're just getting married again after your contract was up. So you're no longer married, you're just getting married anew, right? So divorce and remarriage don't even come into that equation if you're using that definition of marriage. Now, if you get divorced during that 5-minute, 10-year, 20-year time period that was contracted, then that is a divorce, and that's wrong. You're breaking your integrity at the very least, from a human level. You're breaking your integrity, the integrity of the contract that you made, the vow that you made, right? But by all societal standards, up until the last 20 years, marriage has been a lifelong commitment until death do us part. So, yeah, I don't know. It's quite interesting, that's for sure. So yeah, I guess in summary here about what I've said so far regarding this issue, it would be taking into consideration the effect that divorce and remarriage has upon children, and then taking into account the effect that the breaking of your integrity of the vow that you have made. Does that matter? Do vows even matter? If they don't, then there's no point in getting married. There's no point in marriage as an institution. And, that seems to be where people are going with this question a lot of times, is trying to get rid of marriage as an institution so that we can all be polyamorous lovebirds floating around having sex with whoever and whatever we want. Now I get it. That's a claim for the future. That's not actually what's happening. That's not an argument. I'm just saying. I'm kind of venting. So, it's definitely a disturbing trend, and I think we can see how the question of divorce and remarriage leads to the next issue we're going to talk about, which would be the issue of contraception. Because once marriage is kind of a fluid thing, once you allow people to end their contract without any fault for any reason, it's no longer a contract. It's just like a formality that people go through that means nothing. And then also, once you make this sort of no-fault divorce, you then make it completely open to fornication, to adultery. Like, adultery is no longer wrong because, what is marriage in this sort of a view? If you can get divorced whenever you want, what is marriage? Marriage is nothing. Marriage means nothing. So therefore, there's no such thing as adultery, because adultery needs marriage to exist. You can't have adultery in a dating relationship or a friendship relationship. That's not the definition of adultery. You also can't have fornication if marriage doesn't exist. So, you just have free love everywhere all the time. And once adultery and fornication are licit within a society and acceptable, then really you need a way to overcome the natural world. The natural world being that children naturally result from sex. Not every time, obviously, but children are the natural outcome of sexual relations. So you need something unnatural via contraception or abortion to halt that natural process. So this whole experiment would not have been possible before the invention of the pill, basically, the birth control pill. This whole experiment of the sexual revolution would not have been possible if it were not for the birth control pill and other modes of contraception that were widely distributed and made distributable after about World War II. Now, of course, there have always been forms of contraception, and abortion has always existed as an abhorrent human practice, right? And there have always been modes to contracept pregnancy. People using various forms of condoms. They didn't have latex, obviously, but they had other things they could use. You also have, the sin of the Onanism, the sin of the story of Onan in the Bible, who, spilt his seed on the ground during sexual relations in order not to conceive a child, right? So there's that as a common historical mode of contraception. And I've made arguments against contraception in the past. You can go back and visit those episodes, and I've had people say, that wasn't a very conclusive episode, the episode argument against contraception. And it wasn't meant to be so. It wasn't meant to be a knockdown argument. I don't think that there are any knockdown arguments for most social or moral issues. Really, on anything, there's no knockdown argument, unless you're talking mathematics. And even then, that's being questioned now. So it depends on your standard. If you're taking a skeptical standard, like there's really no such thing as a knockdown argument ever. It depends on your standard of knowledge and epistemology, what's actually a knockdown argument. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but I was meaning those 3 episodes in the argument against contraception to be to be helps, to be little arrows you can put in your quiver regarding that question. I don't think there are any knockdown arguments, because even the sociological ones or the environmental ones regarding, the harm that contraceptives do to the environment, the harm that they do to society, which is basically what I'm talking about in this monologue, people can obviously skirt around that in any way that they want. They're not knockdown arguments. Anyway, done with that tangent. The divorce and remarriage, especially, no-fault divorce, where you can get one for virtually any reason, it makes adultery and fornication no longer issues. It makes them no longer problems. They're just one of many relationships one can have. They no longer exist, really. And thus, it makes a necessity for contraceptives, because we have to block nature in some way when we're talking about these issues. And I think that's like one of the arguments. Well, okay, if we're talking about arguments against contraception, one of the arguments at the heart there is the argument against nature. And I talked about this in those episodes. The arguments against nature, that you need some unnatural, man-made form to create contraception. The only form of utterly natural contraception is natural family planning, which uses the rhythm of the woman's cycle, her period cycle, to... sorry, I'm parking. It uses the rhythm of the woman's cycle, when she's menstruating, when she's her fertile periods, in order to figure out exactly, when can we get pregnant. So it can be useful. Natural family planning can be useful for getting pregnant, and it can also be useful for abstaining from getting pregnant, right? And obviously, I have to make this caveat here that within the Catholic Church, should be clear to most of my listeners, but maybe not, that one should not have a contraceptive mentality. So a mentality of not bringing life into the world, unless one has an incredibly good reason, being severe poverty or things like that. Health of the mother, things of that nature. But if it's just so that you can have more fun of a life and take lots of vacations and things like that, that according to the Catholic Church, if you're a Catholic, that is not a viable reason or intention to use natural family planning in a contraceptive sort of a way, in a way that you're preventing pregnancy, right? So anyway, I figured that needed to be said, because people are often confused on that issue. All right, it doesn't mean that you need to just be a rabbit and pop out dozens and dozens of children. I mean, that's not really possible anyway, for most people, at least. There are some anomalies out there where you can get like 20 kids, even from the same two parents, but that's really, really rare. Anyway. So next time, I think we will discuss the issue of contraception. I think we've discussed divorce and remarriage enough, and then how this issue of contraception flows out of that. We'll discuss the issue of contraception next. After that, we'll go to the issue of homosexuality. After that, transgenderism, and then maybe I'll talk about a little bit of transhumanism. But I don't know. I don't know a whole lot about it. I feel like I'd just be blowing smoke rings in the sky. It'd be kind of fun, but pointless. So, all right. Thanks, y'all. Oh, real quick, please feel free to subscribe to any of my podcasts on any of the podcast players. Find me on YouTube. Please subscribe. Like me on Facebook, like the Catholicism Car channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. We're all there, Catholicism Car. And then I also have a Patreon account if you wish to support what I do at this podcast and this YouTube channel. And you can also support us on Anchor.fm. There's a support button there you click on. I also have links to all this on my website's support page at www.catholicisminthecar.com.